Thanks, Dr. Moten. Really appreciate it. Just wanted to say hi, and then I'm going to share a screen because I have lots of slides and pictures. And say how happy I am to be with you. I wish I could see your faces. I wish we could be together in person because NAMI Central Texas is close to my heart. I probably know some of you. I was in private practice there in Austin for 20 years, and actually got to speak with this group about 5 years ago. So happy that you're here and happy to engage with you. And I look forward to lots of questions and discussions. So I'll try to limit my remarks with that in mind. And I'm going, because the pictures are more interesting than my face, I want to go ahead and share screen and show you my slides. Okay, so it's time to end the ambivalence about mental health. What do I mean and what are we talking about? Well, first of all, I know NAMI Central Texas. I'm not talking about you. If you're in this meeting, I don't need to end your ambivalence. You're not ambivalent about mental health. You understand, you know what you're dealing with. But I'm going to explain what I mean in regard to the culture's ambivalence. And but first, before I get to the ambivalence, I want to start with some of the more happy part. It's always important, at least to me personally, to always remind myself for all the bad and for all the things that need to be worked on. There's so much good. And when it comes to NAMI and what NAMI is doing and mental health in this cause, there is so much good to celebrate. And so I just want to celebrate a little bit of it and celebrate NAMI. And as I do that, add that I am, I'm talking as a psychiatrist, but I'm also talking as somebody who deals with mental illness myself in my own life. And I'm talking to somebody who deals with mental illness in my family with multiple family members. So I want you to know that I'm whoever you are and whatever your connection with mental health is, I share it. And I'm also not thinking of myself as talking down to anybody. We are definitely all in this together when it comes to mental health. And I'm immensely grateful that NAMI is here and in it with us and gives us a voice. And I want to think about that and how much good has been done in the area of mental health since the 1950s, so the last 70 years. And especially since NAMI was formed in about 1979. So it's really not that old, it's about 40 years. And our culture in that time, I have gray hairs, I'm old enough, this is within my living memory. I can remember the 1970s when people were starting to talk about therapy, but nobody would talk about having a mental illness or a mental health problem. And nobody would talk about taking a medication or being in the psychiatric hospital. Before 1965, if you went into a psychiatric hospital, there was a good chance you'd spend the rest of your life there. The average stay in a psychiatric hospital was 10 years. That's all just changed drastically. Treatment has changed drastically, but most of all, our culture's view of mental health has changed drastically, so much so that these mental health acts passed in 96 and 08 and 2016, which really formally gave parity for mental health and other medical conditions. These were overwhelmingly bipartisan, okay? In our polarized age where people are so divided, actually, everybody, the vast majority of members of both parties agreed and got together and passed these acts to support mental health. And in my mind, the number one reason why we've come so far and really flipped the whole culture in terms of mental health is NAMI and the work of people in it and other organizations like it. And this change is so profound. If we look at it today, this is all from recent polls. 80 to near 100% of the public agrees that mental illness is real medical illness. 2/3 say it's a serious a serious health problem. Almost 90% say it's nothing to be ashamed of, and people are aware that they're becoming more open on this issue. And so these are not, this is not a chunk of people. This is the vast majority of people who now really indicate an acceptance of the reality of mental health and mental illness and its treatment. And that is massive. What that means is we have made more progress in the last 70 years on mental health than all of human history before that combined. I mean, it is mind-blowing the amount of change that's happened, given how hard it is to change a culture and how long it takes. And I think looking back, it's going to be even more obvious than it's been to people at the time who are in the trenches like you are. So there's every reason to be optimistic about what we're talking about and about the prospects of really pushing all the way through our culture what we need to, the kind of understanding that we need to truly support mental health. So what do I mean by the rest of the way? What are we lacking? Well, you know what we're lacking. In spite of the fact that apparently everybody says, yes, mental illness is real, it's real medical illness, year after year, less than half of people who have it get treatment, less than half. Even with severe mental illness, it's less than 40% having a stable treatment, which means it's not just people who have very mild symptoms and can just kind of push through and be okay. It's all the way down the line. Most people who have mental illness don't get treatment. You know this. And of course, many of the people who are so tragically lost to suicide, the vast majority have not had contact with a mental health professional recently before their deaths. So we have a strange situation where everybody knows the right answer. Everybody knows mental health problems are real and you should get help. And yet on average, it usually takes people about 10 years to get help. And even with severe symptoms that are just about impossible to ignore, like psychosis, it still takes a couple of years because I think we're so ambivalent as a group about this. Still, in spite of legal parity, insurance companies don't treat mental illness like medical illness. I don't need to lecture you about this. You live it every day, so do I. Insurance companies routinely limit talk therapy, which as I'll show is a bona fide, scientifically proven medical treatment. Governments and insurance companies vastly, vastly underfund severe mental illness. Again, you don't need me to tell you about this, you know this. But this is part of our ambivalence. If we really believed, if we really understood, we wouldn't just leave people literally out in the cold, literally out on the street who have severe illness. I know so many people personally who, if they could just get into longer term, like at a good top-notch residential treatment center and be in a treatment center for 3 months or 6 months or 1 year, it would change the course of their illness and the course of their lives because they have severe symptoms that aren't likely to respond to anything else. But it's virtually impossible to get that supported today. So everybody knows the right answer, but we're not living it as a culture, right? And just think, as I know you have, we have so many people with severe mental illness living in severe poverty or on the street. What if we did that with cancer or heart disease or diabetes? What if we said, well, we'll pay for some pills for you, but if you have diabetes and you need, a fancy gadget to continuously monitor your blood sugar, or you have kidney failure and you need dialysis, well, you're just on your own. We're not going to pay for that. But that's exactly what we do with mental illness. And so that's why I say there's this ambivalence. Everyone knows about mental health, everyone supports it, and yet we don't act like it. So I feel like we're more than halfway there, but we're definitely not all the way there. And I can show other evidence, but I don't feel I have to. Don't bother to try to read this slide. It's just a partial listing to book after book that comes out every year that basically tells how mental health treatment is either a fraud or corrupt or something you need to be wary of. Here's a book review in the New York Times from just a couple of years ago. Mental illness is all in your brain, or is it? It's about a book, a pretty good book on the history of psychiatry that basically describes psychiatry as a series of failures, including today's psychiatry. Here's one on saying the biology of mental illness is still a mystery, but practitioners don't want to admit it. Like, you know, it's corrupt, we're hiding something, we don't know what we're doing, we're making it up. And here is the world's most important medical journal, the New England Journal of Medicine, 3 years ago with an article arguing that brain change in addiction is learning, that addiction isn't an illness. So this ambivalence runs very deep. And although I'm not talking about NAMI and people in NAMI or you, I am talking about some of my colleagues in psychiatry and psychology and in the general public. So I think we're now in such a good position. We're in a position to end this. There will always be, you know, people who are critical or wary or suspicious, and they, you know, they have the right, and they have the right in their own lives to say what they want to do. But overall, as a cultural issue, I feel that we have everything in place to end this ambivalence and end this hesitancy about mental health treatment and about the way people suffer so much unnecessarily right now. So I want to talk about one way of doing that. I know there are lots of ways. I know that NAMI is engaged in many approaches, but this has to do with just going over, well, things you already know, right? I'm going to go over basic information that's so well studied and so well researched now that there really isn't any debate any longer about the reality of it. It's just people don't know, aren't aware, haven't heard, don't realize how clear and straightforward this is. Now, I know you do. 5 years ago, I came and talked to this group, and my slides went down, and so I ad-libbed and just started asking questions, and this was the best informed group that I've ever spoken to, and I've done a lot of these talks. So I know you know, but I just want to say this as a reminder and encouragement, and also say that I'm going to talk about the medical basis, the biological basis of mental illness, but I'm not saying that mental illness isn't mental. We know it is, right? It's in the name. It's psychological, and it's also social. And social stresses, social identity has a lot to do with it, and so does our psychological life. They're all part of mental illness, right? Mental illness is biological, psychological, and social, and our spirituality can help us there as well. So although I'm going to talk about the biological, that's mainly because I think it's a missing foundation for our culture, and that there are some very now straightforward facts and ways of approaching it that I think can put us over the top with that. This is all in a book. I guess as you would expect, I like my book, but one thing I don't like about it is how much it costs. So if you're interested after today in the book, but it's too expensive, just email me at danielmoreheadmd@gmail.com, and I will try to work out a way with you so that you can get a copy of that. And I would be honored if you were interested. All right, so first, the last people I need to explain mental illness to is NAMI, but just so that you know where I'm coming from, especially for the purposes of today's talk, mental illness is just a kind of medical illness. And the only difference from other kinds of medical illness is that it affects part of the brain we need for mental functions. So mental illness has mental symptoms, but otherwise it's the same as other kind of medical illnesses. So the part of your brain that you need for mood can get sick, and you have major depression or bipolar, or the part of your brain that you need for normal fear gets sick, and you can have panic or an anxiety disorder, or the part of your brain that you need for memory gets sick, and maybe you have a dementia like Alzheimer's. And that's all we're talking about with mental illness. What are we saying? Well, what NAMI's been saying for a long time. It's common, it's real, it's nobody's fault, and it's treatable. And I know you know all these answers, but if you're like me, the more we go over it, the more powerful it gets. So mental illness is common. 5 years ago, we did questions and answers, and you knew exactly what I was going to say. It doesn't feel common when you're in it or when somebody in your family has it, especially when it's severe. But how common is it? Well, over the course of a lifetime, as you know, about half the population will experience a real bona fide mental illness. Now, most of those cases will not be severe, but 6% of the population, even in a year, will experience severe mental illness. Meanwhile, over the course of a year, okay, I have something I need your help with. I really want to, this probably won't happen, but I really want to change this statistic that we all know and quote all the time. Okay, 1 in 5 people every year have a mental illness. Yes, that is right. And that is a safe way to put it. And that's not going to be disproven. But you know what? According to all of the large surveys we have, it's actually even more common than that. It's stunningly common. It's 1 in 4. So where did this 1 in 5 number come from? It took me years to track this down, but every year, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration does a giant survey of thousands of people to see how common mental illness is. And every year it's a little under 20%, 1 in 5. That's this big blue bubble. But the reason it's not 24% is because they don't count people who have addiction, but not another kind of mental illness. And so if you put in people who have addiction, along with the other mental illnesses, you get around 24% or very close to 1 in 4. So if you have a mind to, you can help me change what people say about this, because it is stunningly common, and it's so common. We can know with absolute confidence mental illness is relevant to everyone we meet, right? If it affects half of us, it affects all of us. So I can go into any room and address any group of people, and so can you. And to know that every individual in that room, everybody I'm talking to, cares about mental illness, whether they know it or not. They care about mental health because whether they know it or not, with 1 in 2 people affected, their friends, their family, their coworkers, people they love will be affected, and they care. They might not know it yet, but they care. Some people feel, and I felt for a long time, how on earth could it be this common? Could a medical problem really, I mean, are people just, why aren't people just dying in the streets or running in all directions randomly? Why isn't chaos broken out? Well, I was wrong about that. It's actually pretty common for chronic illnesses to be something that affects a big chunk of the population, right? So I looked it up, and here we go. 90% of us in the course of a lifetime will have high blood pressure, 45% heart disease, 40% cancer and diabetes. So 50% with mental illness at some point in life. It's actually not unreasonable. It really doesn't stand out as far as chronic illnesses that people have a good shot at getting over the lifetime. It's real. Again, I don't need to tell you about this, but we have this cultural ambivalence. On one hand, we know the answer is that it's real. On the other hand, there are continual doubts popping up that say it's made up, it's a myth, or they just, doctors made up the DSM, they made up all these diagnoses, or they just want to put you on pills for no reason. We can show in very, very straightforward ways now just how real mental illness is. Honestly, I'm embarrassed to put these up because I know it's so clear to you, but we have examples now. The brain may be the most complicated thing there is, but we have examples that make it straightforward for anyone to see this with their own eyes. Okay, and this is one, people hearing voices. So on the right of your screen is people who are not hallucinating, but they're hearing someone talking in the room. And when they do that, over there on the left side of the brain in the middle, you can see those colors, those red and orange colors, which mean that the brain is lighting up in this area where we hear voices. Now on the left, you see somebody's brain who's hallucinating. Nobody's talking, but look what's happening in that speech center of the human brain. It's lighting up as if somebody is talking. And what's the point of this? Because you're thinking, well, duh, obviously somebody's hallucinating. The point of this is that mental illness is brain-based. It's not just brain-based, it's also mental and social, but mental illness is biologically real, right? PTSD and depression, we can show atrophy or shrinking of critical parts of the brain. This one that's circled in red is called the hippocampus. It's important for memory and stress control, and it just gets overwhelmed in mental illness. Now, the good news is this can improve with treatment and recovery, but there's no doubt that mental illness is hard on the brain because it is an illness, and we can see brain effects on head scans and with all sorts of other studies on neurotransmitters and hormones and inflammation all over the body. There's no doubt that it's physical. I won't go into the thousands and thousands of studies that show that, but I want to go to something else that says how serious and important mental illness is. And that is because mental illness carries the things that we fear about illness. There's only one reason that we care, sorry. There are only three reasons that we care about illness and disease. And they are, in order of priority: death, it might kill me, that's scary; disability, I might not be able to be there for my family or my job in my normal way; and then decline or deterioration. What if my health goes downhill and I can't do all the things that I used to do over time? And we can look at mental illness and we can compare it to every other kind of medical illness, and we can see just how serious it is. Okay, so as a cause of death, all we have to do is look at suicide. 90% of suicides are caused by mental illness. You know these statistics. Ages 10 to 30, suicide's the #2 medical cause of death. It should be shocking, but we've seen it so many times, it's, I guess, not as much as it should be. Suicide is the #4 cause of death for people 18 to 65, prime adult years, more than diabetes, more than lung disease, and over twice as often as murder or homicide. You're twice as likely to die from mental illness as you are from anybody else in the world killing you. That's how serious and common it is. Disability, you know this too, is a category of illness. Mental illness causes more time spent in disability than any other kind of medical illness. This is not just true in the United States. Worldwide, major depression is the #1 cause of disability. So mental illness kills you at a rate faster than most other illnesses, and it disables people more frequently than most other illnesses. And finally, it shortens the lifespan and hurts our health, even when it doesn't kill us by suicide. You know this statistic too. For the most severe cases, it may take 25 years off the lifespan. But even if you average all cases out, mild, moderate, and severe, you're looking at 10 years or so affected of your lifespan due to mental illness. And these statistics are scary in their way. As somebody who has mental illness, these statistics are not pretty to me. But on the other hand, is this stuff real? Is it as serious as a heart attack? Actually, it is. It's as serious as a heart attack. And mental illnesses, depression, but some of the other mental illnesses as well, like schizophrenia and bipolar, may well be as bad for your health as smoking, if not worse. So the question is, mental illness real? I know you know, but it's just so straightforward now. There can't be any other reason than people's habit and just being bombarded with these mixed messages that would explain our ambivalence. So meanwhile, after presenting some substantial but depressing information, I want to look at maybe some truths about mental illness that we need to communicate, but maybe they're a little happier as well. One of these is, and NAMI has led the way in this, mental illness isn't anybody's fault. Nobody should be blamed. You know, human nature says something goes wrong, we got to have somebody to blame. We got to have a quote fall guy, fall person. But with mental illness, there's nobody to blame. It's a very sad chapter in the history of mental health that mothers in particular and parents were in the crosshairs of blame for mental illness, and that psychiatrists and other mental health professionals blamed some parents. If you have ever been blamed for mental illness in yourself or a family member, you know it was wrong, but I want to say out loud that it was wrong. And I want to say as a psychiatrist that it was wrong and it should never have happened. And I'm sorry that psychiatry was ever involved in that, because as a parent and somebody who deals with it myself, I know that pain. I know the pain that goes with it. It's not great as a psychiatrist to be confused of inventing things or pushing pills, but you know, that's not as big a worry as people being blamed for having it. Right? And if it's a real illness, we don't blame people for having cancer or having heart disease. We admire them for their courage and for their fight and their grit. And the same is true even more with mental illness. Once you know what people are dealing with, you look up to, as I do, people who face it every day. So I want to leave time for discussion, so I'll move along toward the end of this. Mental illness is treatable. We know this, but even in the medical community, I don't think we know it as maybe firmly and thoroughly as we should. These things really need to be in our guts and in our bones. So when we think of mental illness, I often get comments from other kinds of doctors, medical specialists, who say, yeah, you psychiatrists are great, but I could never be a psychiatrist because you can't cure anybody, right? Imagining like a doctor, there's a cut, the doctor sews it up, somebody has an ear infection, put them on antibiotics, you cure them. Hey, great, this is amazing. But those are acute illnesses, okay? Those are illnesses that are going to be short run anyway. If somebody has a cut, they're not going to have that cut 3 weeks from now. Assuming that the bleeding stops, the cut's going to heal with or without treatment. It just heals better with treatment. If you have an ear infection, that tends to be self-resolving. If you break a leg, it's bad, but 2 months, 3 months later, your leg is not going to be broken. It may heal well or poorly, but that is an acute illness and self-limiting. Mental illnesses are chronic illnesses. They just tend to go on indefinitely. But guess what? Most illnesses that affect most people are chronic illnesses. So people say, well, we don't have a cure for mental illness, for depression or schizophrenia or bipolar. Well, you know what? We don't have a cure for diabetes. We don't have a cure for heart disease. We don't have a cure for most kinds of cancer, but we have good treatments and nobody despairs about it. And the same is true for the treatment of mental health conditions, which I will show you right now. All right, so some very smart people, smart research group did a study and they said, well, let's compare, okay? Let's compare medicines for mental health conditions with medicines for everything else people go to the primary care doctor for, okay? So they took the 8 most common mental illnesses and they said, how effective are medicines for these? And then they took 20 common general medical conditions like high blood pressure, stomach ulcers, asthma, diabetes, and they compared apples to apples, how effective are medicines that you get for these. And guess what? Okay, I know the bar is a little taller in blue there for general medical treatments, but that was within the margin of error for the study. So statistically, if you go to a psychiatrist or primary care doctor and come out with a prescription for a medicine for your mental health condition, on average, that medicine is just as likely to help you as when you go to your family doctor for any other kind of medical condition. On average, they're equally effective, and that is just medicines. And more of the good news is that we have so much more than medicines that are real bona fide medical treatments for mental illness. And I'm talking about talk therapy, but I'm talking about more than that. Okay, patient education, support groups, the kind of things that NAMI does, and 12-step programs that they do, and NAMI's peer-to-peer and family-to-family groups. Those are proven to help the course of people's mental illness. Those are bona fide treatments. And it's not in competition with somebody's medicine or their therapy. They all work together. Okay, your spiritual life can help your medical and mental health. Exercise is a biggie, but first I want to talk about talk therapy just briefly. Talk therapy is powerful medical and biological treatment. Talk therapy, we have thousands of studies showing that all the major kinds of talk therapy really work for all major mental illnesses. And talk therapy helps for things as severe as bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, as well as anxiety and depression and all the rest. And it's proven hundreds and thousands of times over. It's not anything to have doubt about anymore. Finally, exercise, I'll just put in a word for that. Yes, we all know we need to exercise. Yes, it's hard to do, but the good news is, however little you exercise actually helps you a lot and helps your brain a lot. You don't have to be a gym rat spending hours a day. It could be try to go for a walk for 10 to 15 minutes a day, or even less than that will help the brain. And it will release growth factors that help neurons grow and sprout. And it will help specific mental illnesses, including, perhaps surprisingly, at least to me, schizophrenia, one of the most severe. Saw a review of 5 very well done studies showing that it's hard to exercise, but if people can exercise even helps schizophrenia. So we don't just have one treatment. We don't just have medications. We have many treatments and they all work together, biological, psychological, and social. All right, so here we are at the end, and then I hope we can have some good discussion because I'm looking forward to your thoughts. I know you know this. This is the voice of NAMI. This is what NAMI offers, but I want to say it out loud because it is totally realistic. It's based in reality. It's based in science. It's based in things that our entire culture needs to come to terms with and will at the rate we're going. Number one, mental illness is common. So common it affects everyone. Number two, mental illness is real. It's as real as any medical illness, and we could prove it. Three, mental illness is nobody's fault. Getting sick is just part of the human condition, and directly or indirectly, it affects us all. Finally, mental illness is treatable. How treatable? Well, on average, as treatable as other common medical conditions. So this is what we're saying to our culture, all of us, you, me, all of us who fight this fight. If you or somebody in your family deals with mental illness, number one, you are not alone. Number two, you're not making this up. Number three, you're not to blame. And number four, you're not doomed. There is help. And so I am genuinely, deeply grateful for what you do, for what NAMI does, and for people who fight this fight every day in their personal lives and then do whatever they can to be of help to others. So I appreciate your time. I'm grateful for it, and I want to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Dr. Morehead. We have a couple of questions. The first question is, I think sometimes people get disheartened when they can't find a good therapist. Sometimes they have to go through many to find one we can connect with. How do we address finding a good match before giving up?
This is one of so many questions I wish I had a great answer to. Internet reviews actually help us a lot, although you have to filter out, I wish I was psychiatry's gift to everyone and everyone's best therapist and doctor. I know I'm not. So, there are people who maybe found that I wasn't the right person for them, but you look online and look at reviews, but word of mouth, nothing beats it still for finding, trying to find names, especially from people that you trust. And then, the discouragement, man, I know that from all sides as a parent and somebody who's looked for help. And so whenever anybody calls me as a psychiatrist, people call in and leave a message or maybe email, I remind myself that person has been through glass on their hands and knees for a long, long time in the build up to making this call. You've tried everything, family, friends, maybe primary care doctors. Nobody wants really to go to the psychiatrist. And so there's a huge amount of courage and endurance that we all have to get to help. And it's not right. We shouldn't ask people in crisis, to jump through all these hoops or make all these calls. But the main thing is don't give up. Ask, make calls. If you call an office and you don't hear back, calling them again, because they're busy, they get bunches of calls. Be persistent, get help, get somebody in to tag team with you to make calls or ask. And as the end of every question here, I'll probably say NAMI is a great resource for this, but it is because people have been around for years and done this for years and know the local communities, including the Austin mental health community. But it's discouraging, no doubt.
Thank you. The next question is, there are federal parity laws. I read recently that the problem with enforcement is lack of data to prove parity violations. Is this true? Recent Malakan paper and WSJ piece about lack of in-network mental health availability should in itself show lack of parity. What is missing from enforcement, and should EMDR be covered the same as other therapies such as physical therapy?
That's a big question and a tough one. Like most doctors, I'm not, totally enamored of insurance as an industry. I'm glad we have it. I'm glad to have insurance. but it is really tough. And so as you know, what we have now, we have these laws, federal laws, and most states have laws. Texas has some relevant laws that say, look, you have to treat mental health like any other part of people's health, and you can't segregate it off and pay for it differently or discriminate against it. And lo and behold, the insurance companies haven't moved that much in my personal experience. This is just anecdotal, and I see an article here and there that says the same thing. So, and forgive me, because this is kind of my cynical mind. I don't know what's going on. What my cynical mind says is, yeah, they got bunches of lawyers. So maybe they're saying, come enforce it, or make us. And they're thinking, wow, this is a lot of money. Now we know that treating mental illness saves money, but I don't think that's another thing that's totally percolated through the culture. I do know there are lawsuits going on now. There was just a big one settled, I think, in the state of New York, and I think it was United Healthcare. I may be wrong about that, but where the court ruled against the insurance company because they weren't abiding by parity. So these cases take years and years to work out. And again, I think if you look at the big picture, we're slowly moving the ball down the field and things are slowly going to get better, but it is slow. I mean, we've had parity laws for years and years. And personally, I don't think we have anywhere near parity, as I think you can tell from this talk. So missing from enforcement, yeah, it's so hard to get the details of how each insurance company is doing it, and then why they do it the way they do, and whether it's fair or not. And honestly, I'm glad it's not my job to do. But what I think we can do is where you see people making an effort, like doing a cert, like NAMI. I know we'll do these kinds of things periodically, where there's a survey of, well, how did it go with your mental health care and your insurance? All of us should participate as best we can, because when somebody says, let's get together some data, we can't do anything without that data. So I agree, that's the basic thing that's missing, and it's hard to get, but we need people to organize us. Again, like NAMI, here I am at the end of the question.
Thank you. Next question. Do you have any thoughts on church groups where people say platitudes like, only God can truly satisfy our needs? I don't buy into that, but it's worse somehow. I only need God statements fly around.
So another good question, another hard question. I'm a person of faith, and so this is important to me as well. I know Dr. Moten works a lot of faith communities, and NAMI Central Texas does. So yes, people are people, as I remind myself. So everything that people do outside of faith communities, people do inside of faith communities, including helpful and truly well-meaning advice that really can hurt sometimes, right? Like, you don't have to be in a faith community. You say, I'm depressed, and people will say, well, stop feeling sorry for yourself and do something for somebody else, right? Or just don't take it so hard. All kinds of things that are normal to say, but they don't help, they hurt. And so in faith community, yes, I agree, we have God talk. And on one hand, as a person of faith, I feel, yes, we just look to God. But then on the other hand, I feel like, my goodness, has that been misunderstood and misapplied, right? Because when somebody has cancer, how often in your life do you hear somebody say, well, I have cancer and I just can't decide? I mean, on one hand, the doctors are saying I need this chemotherapy and treatment, but on the other hand, I feel like I should just have faith and pray. And if I have faith, I won't need that other stuff. Nobody says that, right? I'm doing both. We just assume somebody's doing both if they're a person of faith. But yet in mental health, it's like, well, which one should I do? And there, I think we have this false dichotomy, right? We have psychological versus spiritual versus biological. It's all part of the same thing in my mind. And so how we handle it, I don't know, Dr. Moten may have thoughts, but I feel like we don't maybe go for controversy, but we just put in a word. And I tell you, whether you're in a faith community or anywhere else, if it's safe and appropriate and you feel like speaking up and you say, okay, this is my experience, I had this, I did this, right? I'm a person of faith and I want to completely depend on God, but you know what? I found that God was letting me know I need to make use of treatments God's offering me. That is so much more powerful than 100 talks by somebody like me speaking as a doctor. And that is the kind of grassroots thing that makes a difference, as you know. And so what's my point? I just want to encourage you. You don't have to speak up ever. You don't have to share your story ever if you don't want to. But if you feel called to, that is a powerful place to do it, because once faith communities get turned in the direction of supporting people's mental health, it's the results are profound, I think. So please don't give up. That's my answer.
Thank you. The next question is, how do we help adults who resist treatment?
These questions are getting harder and harder. um, I wish I had the answers to this. When I'm asked to do, I have people that I see and I've seen for years. And, thanks to the pandemic and telemedicine, I'm still seeing people in Austin that I've known for years. But I have another group of people that I'm asked to do like a second opinion kind of consult. By far, the number one most common reason people want an opinion is this, which is I have a family member, they may or may not come to the appointment. They don't feel like they need treatment, or they don't see the problem, or they don't stick with treatment, or whatever it is. What do I do? And it is absolutely excruciating. And of course, this is why NAMI was founded. Literally, it had to do with families and how painful it was and how difficult it was to be heard or know what to do as a family member. There's a good book. I know you all know about it. It's called, what's it called? I'm Not Sick, I Don't Need Help, by Javier Amador. Boy, I'm bad with names. I apologize if I got that wrong. That's the best book I know of. What it talks about is whenever possible, you just make a relationship and you listen and try to understand. And there's something that goes along with that called motivational interviewing, which if you're not familiar with it, you can Google it. It's a well-developed, interviewing technique in medical settings, but yet it's not rocket science. All it's doing is listening and asking questions like, what do you think about your drinking? Or what do you think about these symptoms or hallucinations or your mood? And then going through over time, well, have you ever considered, looking for any kind of help or considered any kind of treatment? And just truly, truly listening to what people say in response. And it seems like that wouldn't do anything, but yet hundreds of studies show that it's really powerful, just listening and asking questions and trying to understand. And then at some point saying, have you thought about help or a medicine or an evaluation? Or have you thought, are you interested in finding out more about that? You wouldn't have to do it, but you could find out more. All right, so there's some really great techniques and resources. Every time somebody asks me about this and I go through those, they've tried them all before. They've tried everything. And I actually did a whole talk on this a couple of months ago, and I had to confess at the beginning of the talk, I don't know the answer. I know that one other thing that needs to be stressed that you'll get support with in NAMI groups is there is a line about what you should tolerate as a family member. And for your own sake and for the person who has the symptoms, we can't tolerate an ongoing situation of abuse, right? Where somebody's being injured, physically attacked, maybe they're in danger, or just verbally, torn down, verbally abused, incident after incident. That is something that it doesn't mean you have to kick somebody out or walk out immediately, but that cannot go on. And no one should be subjected to that. So regardless, if your family member is hallucinating or has a break with reality, or is, thinks you're trying to poison them and they're coming after you, it doesn't mean they need to be punished, but you should not be subjected to that. So you do whatever you need to do to be safe. If it's a crisis, call the mental health deputies. If it's not a crisis, get help from NAMI and from treaters, but don't go on in a situation where there's abuse, because that hurts the person who's abusing as much as it does the person who receives the abuse.
Thank you. The next question is, insurance coverage for therapy is often not helpful since so many therapists don't accept insurance now. What do we do? What do we do to get more therapists on those insurance panels?
Well, yep, here's another. I appreciate these questions because I've just realized how on point you all are. I'm talking about how we're kind of halfway there, maybe a little more than halfway. Well, here we are again. We're part of the way there, right? Psychotherapy, talk therapy is proven. We have there are lots of therapists in the Austin area, and yet it's hard to find one. And paying out of pocket is expensive. And for psychiatrists anyway, the last national survey I saw said it was half and half. Half of psychiatrists are on insurance. And I've been on and off for different reasons. And the reason I was off it for a good bit of time was I couldn't do talk therapy because my rent and my phones and all cost more than I would get from the insurance company for talk therapy. So anyway, so then if you have to stay on insurance, which is most people, it's hard to find somebody, and it's hard to find the right person. And that to me goes back to being persistent. And now with telemedicine, we have so many more possibilities. So in-person therapy is better, no doubt about it. But I've done therapy from both sides, both as a therapist and somebody going to therapy, almost all live before the pandemic, but I've done it virtually, and it's real therapy if you find the right person. So if you've just called and you can't get anything, or at least anybody that suits you, one thing I've known people to do is they call their insurance company. And this, I've made it clear I don't really trust insurance companies, but they actually have an obligation, and they will do it. If you tell them you can't find anybody, they are supposed to help you find somebody. And I've known multiple people that actually, they called and pressed their insurance company, and the insurance company did find them somebody on the insurance, or even went out and negotiated a contract with a therapist to see them. So again, should you have to do this when, if you're depressed or anxious or bipolar, should you have to go through all this? It's a travesty. But yet, don't give up on yourself or your family, and keep pushing, because people who don't give up, just don't give up with mental illness. People eventually find a path. We don't know where it's going to be, but they eventually find it. And so, yeah. And as always, with my answers, consult NAMI.
Here's a follow-up question to that. What do you think about the emergence of BH telemedicine? And do you think it works just as well as in-person care?
Oh, another good one. And I can speculate, since we don't totally know the answer scientifically, right? We haven't had time to do the studies. But just personal experience, and I'm, everybody's is as valid as mine. That there's something about being with somebody live and in person, that I don't know what it does, but my body and brain just respond differently than online. But on the other hand, it's a real relationship. And I've done phone therapy with people without any video on a long-term basis because they couldn't leave home or whatever. And you know what? It can work. And so the thing to do is try what's most reasonable, but then observe yourself and observe your life. And is this working? Right? I know therapists that say some people do better on the phone or do better on Zoom. And people sure show up more because they don't have that long commute. But you try what makes most sense for you. And if it's not working, then maybe you think, well, what do we need to change here? Do I need to have more sessions? Do I need a new therapist? Do I need in person? And I know it's kind of a cop out of an answer, but as I tell people that I see regularly, there is no book on you, right? You have to write the book on you with the help of people around you. And so everybody's writing their book of mental health treatment. And so you just listen to yourself.
Thank you. How have you seen the ambivalence on mental health change due to COVID?
Uh, Boy, that's good too. Man, I should have prepared for this one. I didn't. I think and I say this obviously, I don't have expertise here, but I have the impression that it's in some ways it's made it easier to talk about mental health and that we're hearing more about it. And it's like people almost have an additional reason, like it's okay because COVID. I got anxious because COVID, or I was drinking too much because COVID. And that's, the pandemic has turned all of our lives upside down, but I'll take any silver lining I can get. And so, if it's increased awareness, and I think it has, and I think it's increased some openness, then let's take the ball and run with it. Yeah.
How do family members help the person the most in your experience?
When I'm a family member, and my experience as a family member is I just wish I could do it better and do it more. And I wish I could go back and correct all the mistakes I made, because I know I made a bunch with my family. So it is a heavy, heavy thing. And it's, as I was just saying, and thanks, Dr. Moten, for putting the questions in just the right order too, or everybody asked them in the right order. It's not one size fits all. Sorry, wait, what? I forgot the question. The question was, how do you, best help family members? Yeah, what techniques helps best? Okay, number one, boundaries. Now, if the boundaries are there and being respected, you don't have to talk about or worry about boundaries, right? If everybody's being respectful of each other, fine. But if boundaries are not in place, right? People are invasive in somebody's life, or people are abusive or hurting each other. And first, the number one thing is we got to get the boundaries right, which means it's a safe situation for everybody. And nothing else good can happen until everybody's safe. Then once everybody's safe, it's about relationship. So, and you can offer, but we can't make somebody do something. And I try to remind myself, okay, I'm a psychiatrist, right? I should know just what to do in my family. Well, most of the time I'm uncertain. And even when I feel like I'm certain, I can't make anybody do anything, literally. And so all we can do is offer and ask questions and do the motivational interviewing stuff that I was talking about. And then it's about relationship, right? Over the long term, if somebody's resistant, if they're not in a life-threatening or abusive situation, but they're refusing to get help, you decide how much you can support them. And that's a thorny question we don't have time for, which I'm kind of glad about. But I got a talk online coming out about it. We decide how much to help them, but the main thing is you cultivate a good relationship, and that is through asking questions and understanding. And I know we're low on time, but I just want to say this. For those of us that have experienced mental illness, it's normal, but it feels like at the time of personal failure, and it can feel humiliating when I can't control myself or my life, or I need help. And so it's very, very sensitive when people are first coming to try and accept that they're dealing with a mental illness that they can't control. And of course, none of us can control ours in a direct way. And so patience and love and understanding and the power of treating somebody with respect and truly listening, not just act like you're listening till you can tell them what to do, but really, really listen. surprises me every time, and this is after 25 years as a therapist, I can't believe how powerful it is in the long run. So if you have time and lives aren't in danger, I don't know of anything better than that.
Thank you. I just have a couple more questions, and these are the last two. Um, there are a lot of apps and programs out there. Are they really a substitution for real therapy?
I'm laughing because I can't get over how good these questions are. I need to be up to date here too. There's a lot of research and there are apps that can help. I mean, there's some, I don't have any favorites, but there's some good ones like on sleep if you have insomnia. There's some real good ones that use proven sleep techniques, self-relaxation / meditation. There's some good apps for that. There's some good ones actually for post-traumatic stress disorder. And to me, it's another tool, and we need all the tools we can get. So I'm grateful for it. And then to me, no, it doesn't substitute for people, right? We need personal relationships, people that care about us and we care about. And if you have mental illness at points along the way, you know, again, like me personally, we need treatment relationships. And those don't substitute for all our personal relationships, but they give us a different kind of support. And to me, nothing takes the place of people. And I'll use what I call the 4-letter word of psychiatry, which is love. But in mental health, if you find somebody and they're good and you stick with them and they know you and you know them deeply over years, there's so much good stuff in that to be had.
Thank you. And for the final question, Dr. Morehead, you mentioned on a slide the lack of quality inpatient care facilities. Are there any choices where to go or what to look for in a facility?
Wow. All right. 1 minute. I'm sure people have commitments too, but word of mouth again is the best. Internet reviews maybe second best. And for most inpatient, for most hospitalizations, it's going to be 2 to 5 days. And so you want a place that's you know, competent and humane and caring, but it's, you know, it's stabilization. It's not the bulk of your treatment. And so I feel less worried about that than, you know, if people need longer term, it's so hard to get from insurance. But if you can get coverage, there are national places. I mean, the closest one to Austin, I would say, is the Menninger Clinic in Houston. Up here on the East Coast, there's places like Shepherd Pratt. There's, you know, the Betty Ford Center and others for substance abuse recovery. So there are national centers that do longer term treatment, but that is so hard to get. And so for local stuff, I just ask. And again, hey, NAMI's your best resource. So how about that? You're in the right place.
Well, on behalf of NAMI Central Texas and the community, Dr. Morehead, we thank you. We thank you for sharing your information, your experiences, and just educating us and making us more aware on this topic. So we appreciate your time and thank you all for joining us today. And we just say thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. Appreciate your time.